small businesses have been paying but not getting rebates, and that now totals $2.5 billion in unpaid rebates.
Hi, I'm Faisal Karmali. Welcome to Karmali Exchange. Business owners need to help each other out. Keep on pushing to meet the needs of the customer will meet the needs of the business. Welcome to the Karmali Exchange, and look at this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, way more than 10 different articles about the whole carbon tax issue. It is filled up in this room with everybody talking about the carbon tax, but how does it really impact the business owners? Let's go right to the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, Dan Kelly. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, Faisal.
Well, you saw me throw all these articles, and this is only a few that my team could put together. If we were to search every single article or every single mention about the carbon tax, well, we would be here all day just flipping paper up in the air. Dan, this has been a very big concern for a lot of business owners. Give us your take of what the impact is for business owners with this new carbon tax starting April 1st.
Sure. Look, the introduction of any new tax, the increase in any tax is always going to be a difficult sell for small and medium-sized businesses. But the carbon tax has a couple of angles that really make it deeply worrisome. We estimate at CFIB that SMEs pay about 40% of the entire burden of the carbon tax. So it's not a small tax load on them if you think about it at every step of production. When you're producing something, selling something, the next guy that supplies you, gosh, there are so many layers to the federal carbon tax, and it gets deeply embedded in both consumer and business pricing. On top of that, many businesses have told us that they are finding that they're just having to eat the tax. With a 23% increase in just the last couple of days, it's little wonder why this is so worrisome for small firms.
Dan, just really jumping in here, what about the whole rebates and everything? Yeah. There's a lot of debate. Social media is packed on this true or not true about the rebates. What's happening when it comes to the rebates that are available to business owners? You can pick any province you'd like and kind of give us more details if you have any, but what's your view of that?
You know, when the carbon tax was first imposed by the federal government in 2019, the government said that we're going to provide consumers with rebates of the carbon taxes that they pay, but they also said that 10% of the carbon tax revenue would be set aside to provide rebates to others, including small and medium-sized businesses. Well, the consumer rebates went ahead. 80% of Canadians, the government tells us, are better off getting more back in rebates than they actually spend in carbon tax. But if that's true, that means that some people are not getting back as much in or anything in the rebates that compared to the amount that they pay. Guess who that is? Small and medium-sized businesses. While the government said in 2019 that it would set aside 10% of the rebate pool for others, including SMEs, it has not delivered any of that money back to those recipients. So for 5 straight years, small businesses have been paying but not getting rebates, and that now totals $2.5 billion in unpaid rebates to small companies.
So why hasn't the government given the rebates back to SMEs?
Well, look, there's a whole bunch of theories. One of them is that they don't intend to do it at all. I actually, in talking to politicians, as I do on a regular basis, I do believe that they're intending to give the money back at some stage, but they haven't figured out an administrative means to do it. At first, they said they were going to create some environmental programs that you could apply for grants or money to get some of your carbon tax revenue back if you spent it on environmental initiatives as a business. That went nowhere. Virtually nobody applied for the programs that were first created in 2019 and 20. Of course, with most government programs, if you wish to use them, you have to swear your firstborn child, fill out about 5,000 documents to try to get a sliver of money back. The programs were canceled in those early days. Then the government sat on its hands for a couple of years. Of course, there was the pandemic going on. I can give them a bit of an excuse for that. But in recent years, the carbon tax revenue has not been still delivered back. They've said that they're going to try to rebate it back to emissions-intensive, trade-exposed businesses in the 8 provinces that are covered by the carbon tax: Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and the 4 Atlantic provinces. But no action has actually happened on that. We have been lobbying to broaden the rebates to get the money back to all the small businesses that pay it, not just to some. Nobody can tell us what an emissions intensive trade exposed business even is. So we're trying to get back that $2.5 billion. It's one of the main reasons why the carbon tax is actually not revenue neutral at this stage, because the government is sitting on $2.5 billion it has supposed to been returned to small and medium-sized firms over the last 5 years.
Dan, what's your understanding of why we even have this tax? And let me give you an example
Sure.
of where this is coming from. We have had in this country, either through provincial or federal manners, ways to try to change behavior. This is my understanding of the carbon tax. If we tax, then the behavior will change. No different than cigarette smoking or a sugar tax or what have you. It is to change behavior. Do you think that the carbon tax is going to change behavior, or is it just going to increase the costs from the input to output of a product?
This is the essential question. And look, I'm prepared to acknowledge that if you raise the price of something, over time, people try to use less of it because the costs have gone up. We've seen that happening in our household budgets right now due to the pressures of inflation. People are spending less on non-essential items because they just don't have the money to do it. But those changes take a long time, and they depend on technological advances to allow us to make these switches. And so, the carbon tax might, taxing something might have a long-term impact in slowing demand. But right now, Canadian carbon emissions have risen with the carbon tax. Other countries with no carbon tax have actually seen their emissions go down through technological innovations and other changes. So this is, sure, it's one tool, but not the only tool. Our major complaint, of course, is if you're going to have a carbon tax at all, for goodness sakes, make it fair. If the theory is that you tax people with the carbon tax and then give them back that money so they can use it for lower carbon activities, that doesn't work if you just give them the stick and don't give them any of the carrots. And that's the situation that has gone by for far too long for small and medium-sized companies. They're just not getting back the rebate scheme because the federal government has not had the energy to deliver it.
Dan, we have the carbon tax now. It is what it is. We'll see what happens in the next election. What's your advice to business owners that have to deal with this bullshit that's going on and they have to get through all this stuff? These entrepreneurs and business owners are not only putting out themselves and their families at risk when they take on and work in a business, but they're also employing a whole bunch of people that could be impacted in the future.
I think primarily we don't have to accept that the status quo is going to be the case forever. Of course, there is an election campaign, and it's very clear, as you said, that this is going to be the central issue. The next federal election will likely be a referendum on the future of the retail carbon tax. But even before that, even now, we can change our outcome. And that's why CFIB has a petition on our website, cfib.ca, calling on Ottawa to make good on the rebates that it promised to small business. I will say that we've actually finally seen that the logjam is broken a little bit. We've had support for some major changes to the rebate scheme from the government of Saskatchewan, from the government of Alberta, from the government of Ontario. And it does look like the federal government is putting some energy in getting the money out the door. That would be good news. These rebate checks could be huge. We could see small and medium-sized companies getting several $1,000s back over the next year in carbon tax rebates if we're successful. So I don't think business owners should just suck it up and accept it. Of course, all of us need to make sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that our environmental policies in every business are as strong as is possible. Consumers are often expecting that. But for goodness sakes, we live in a cold country. All the technologies are not there to displace carbon emissions perfectly. We need to do what we can, but at the same time, we need to live in the real world. And as many others have said, there are other contributions Canada can make to lower greenhouse gases by displacing some very dirty oil with natural gas if we can get our LNG pipelines going properly. Canada could make a major contribution in lowering carbon emissions worldwide if we can actually sell our lower emissions energy to other countries that are demanding it right now. And we're missing that opportunity every single day.
Some of our friends, Dan, will say in Ottawa, the answer is electric vehicles, but that's a separate topic, and we'll leave it on that piece right there. You talked about the struggles that business owners have gone through. Let's talk about the pandemic. During the pandemic, the CEBA loan, or the Canadian emergency business account was issued out to many businesses throughout the country. There was a big uproar in regards to the return of that money. Some were asking for it to be a forgivable loan. Some were asking it to be a grant of 100% of it. We've seen a lot of businesses take up on this. From your perspective as of today, what should be done going forward? Because if I remember correctly, 200,000 small businesses had to take on new loans just to pay the CEBA loan itself. So they've been refinancing it at interest rates that are much higher than when the pandemic started. What are your thoughts about this whole CEBA issue as we see it today?
Oh, you're 100% right. Look, this is by no means a final policy. We need to make some further changes to try to get some of the debt levels reduced in small and medium-sized firms. At the start of the pandemic, look, the federal government did create several helpful programs to help small firms get through the pandemic. CEBA was first, the Canada Emergency Business Account. There was the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy. There were provincial grant programs that were in place. But even with the full use of all of those support programs, our estimate is that about 2/3 of the losses that businesses encountered, they had to eat themselves. The government support programs may have covered about 1/3 of the losses, but 2/3 were on the books, still are on the books of most businesses across the country. With the CEBA loan, of course, there were a couple of deadline delays. The loans were originally due by December 31st of 2022. We lobbied government and had that pushed back to the end of 2023. We lobbied again to get an additional year, given how long the restrictions had been in place. The government did extend it to January 18th. But as of January 18th of just this past year, just a couple of months ago, if you had repaid your CEBA loan by then, if you managed to do it, you managed to get then a $20,000 of your $60,000 loan forgiven. But if you missed that deadline, you then saw your loan balance go to the full $60,000. And if you struggled to repay it before, gosh, you've got even a bigger uphill battle over the next 3 years to get the debt behind you.
Here's my concern with this, Dan. Sorry for jumping in on this one, but here's my concern about this type of loan or any program that the government gave. And I understand the pandemic, and I feel bad for a lot of businesses. I have a couple of businesses out there that struggled during the pandemic as well. It was terrible experience. But there were a lot of businesses that I call zombies. They're the walking dead. They should have been shut down before the pandemic. They got a bit of a lifeline. On the other end, there were a whole bunch of businesses that were financially viable, were able to get through the pandemic, didn't need the CEBA loan, took the money anyways, just because it was free capital. Now, when you look at those two extremes, I'm more concerned that there was a bunch of zombies out there that are just making the loudest noise out of us business owners. And that causes a big damper because these businesses shouldn't have survived prior to the pandemic. Forget about the pandemic itself. How should the government change that? Should they start going into the financials of each company? Should they look at the business and say, you were a shitty company before, you don't deserve this money? What should they do to kind of make it a level playing field for all of us business owners that are trying to make this work and actually add value, add employees, add profit, pay taxes, so on and so forth?
One, I entirely agree with you that most government support programs, most business subsidy programs are stupid. It's a bad idea when governments get involved in subsidizing businesses. Really, the best policy for government is to ensure that it creates a fair and level playing field out there and lets the market determine which businesses are successful, which ones are not. You're quite right. There are businesses that even with a further extension in the CEBA loan deadline, even with policies to forgive more of the debt, they're not going to survive because the damage has been done or the business went into COVID in very weak shape to begin with. But the group that I'm worried about, these are firms that actually have viable business models. They've made all sorts of pivots. They've now got themselves to a position where perhaps they're able to either break even or earn a small profit because of the changes that they made during the pandemic. If it weren't for the debt that they took on, that they were forced to take on during the pandemic, these businesses would live to fight another day. That's the group that I am working hardest for to make sure that there is some relief. So there's a couple of ways that could happen. One, the government, as you said, could go and look at the financials of every single business in the country, but 900,000 firms took out a CEBA loan. I'm not sure on scale how viable that is. The other approach, though, is to put in place some form of extension for firms to allow them to have some partial forgiveness. And this is what we've said to the government. If you start to make payments on your CEBA loan, if you're starting to unbury yourselves from this debt, could the government, instead of forgiving the whole $20,000, forgive a smaller portion of this? This is what we're asking Ottawa to consider in the days ahead. And of course, we're just a couple of weeks away from the federal budget. I am hopeful that we'll see some action on the carbon tax. I don't think there's going to be any further changes made to the CEBA loan program at this very moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm going to go off script here. My 2 points to chat with you were carbon tax and the CEBA situation.
Sure.
I think we're going to be heading into an election where one topic will be discussed. Either it'll be a big one or a small one, but it's still going to be discussed. Universal basic income has been talked about. The government, especially certain parties within this country, are talking about making sure everybody has some sort of basic income. We experienced that through the pandemic where they were giving out checks to people. Now, here comes my problem, and I need your help with this.
Sure.
If an individual is making a certain amount of income, which we call a basic income, whatever that dollar amount is, the incentive for them to be actively employed goes down. The productivity goes down.
You're
Knowing that this is maybe a potential election topic, and business owners, I think we have a lot more clout, a lot more influence on the decision of who goes into Parliament than ever before if we work together. Knowing that this may be a topic that's coming up, what's your viewpoint, CFIB's viewpoint?
It is a challenging subject, but I agree with you entirely. We had some experiments with the universal basic income during the pandemic, the CERB program, the Canada Recovery Benefit. What happened during that period of time? Of course, there were tons of people that needed that money. And so we didn't oppose the fact that, if you lost your job through no fault of your own, perhaps you didn't have enough hours to generate EI, that there should be some income protection during this worldwide emergency when governments told everybody that they had to stay home. But there were also loads and loads of people that chose that as an opportunity to stay home simply because they had the income stream. I can't tell you how many businesses I spoke to during the pandemic who saw their employees leave en masse when they found out that there was a pathway for them to get $2,000 a month. Now, that's not going to pay the bills for most families, $2,000 a month. But I think for those of us who are naturally hardworking, naturally motivated to do the best and enhance our own incomes, I think many of us struggle to recognize that there is an element in society, in every society and in all provinces, that will do just about anything not to work. There are lots of people that will do anything they can to avoid work. In fact, sometimes it feels like they're doing more work to avoid work than if they actually went and took a job in the first place. So that's the group that I worry about losing.
I just want to jump in and say, so CFIB's viewpoint and yours is that a UBI is a viable option. We just have to have a proper program in place. Is that what
I don't know.
hearing?
I don't know that I would go that far. What I will say, though, is that there are some huge risks of experimenting with the UBI at this stage. I just don't think the labor market is hardened enough to do that. I can't, even with our current employment insurance program, we have 17% of business owners that tell us that they are asked regularly by employees to lay them off so they can collect EI benefits. Like, how sad is that?
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, I remember so many business owners saying to me that their employee told them that they wanted to be laid off to collect the CERB benefit because they said, when else am I going to get government to pay me to stay at home? And that's not a good thing.
Yeah. There's a few things or tips that I give business owners when it comes to issues like this. Number one, be informed. So this show, for example, stay on tune on this type of a show, stay on the exchange, and you'll get more and more information like this. Number two, get engaged with the CFIB. The amount of research you guys do, the amount of work that you do, the amount of advocacy on behalf of business owners is phenomenal. So I want to thank you on behalf of business owners. I don't know if you get a lot of thank yous out there, but I'm saying thank you for what you're doing. One more thing that we want to give our business owners, what can they do? We've got less than 24 months before we have a new administration in Parliament. What's the pieces that individual business owners can do now to make sure that they get their voices heard as we head into the next election?
I think you said it, and that is just to remain informed. Look at opportunities like listening to your broadcast, making sure that you stay involved and try to educate yourself on some of the issues that are affecting you. The reason my organization was created 52 years ago was to give small and medium-sized businesses a voice in where decisions are made. Prior to that, in Canada, big business, big governments, and big unions made all the decisions. And now we have a seat at the table. So stay involved. It's not just my association, but other advocacy-based associations are also a great place. Industry associations, regional chambers, that can help you in multiplying your voice, getting it heard more loudly in provincial capitals and, of course, in Ottawa. But I agree with you. We've got a federal election only a few months away. We need to make sure that business owners shake the trees a little bit. One of the things that I always tell business owners to do is to make sure that they stay in contact with their member of parliament or their MLA. You know, if an MP's office gets 10 calls on a particular problem, they think it's an avalanche of concerns. It doesn't take a ton to get members of parliament, regardless of their political stripe, to take action and to be more sensitive to it. We just need to make sure our voices are heard. And sadly, I think in this current world, we're not taking advantage of those opportunities as often as we should.
Stay involved, stay informed, stay engaged, and don't forget to be part of the exchange. Dan Kelly, the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you.